And we come back. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. This is Two Upfront. My name is Jay. And as always, on this here platform, I'm joined by Chuck. What up, Chuck?
Oh, good, man. Last minute derby winners. As I thought to myself, which is bad as City are, we are worse because sometimes we just look bad against big teams. But we pulled out the fire, so I'm good, man. I'm good.
Yeah, that of course is Manchester United coming through with some Sir Alex Ferguson Fergie time heroics. But we'll get into that. To begin with, we start here at home, right? Well, home and away technically, because CAF Champions League is back on this weekend. Mamelodi Sundowns and Orlando Pirates in action. Sundowns coming through. Also the late winner themselves in that game against Raja Casablanca at Loftus. And Orlando Pirates giving away a lead away from home in the Ivory Coast against Stade Abidjan. And Chuck, beginning with Orlando Pirates, right? 3 games played, halfway through the group. They've got 5 points. They haven't lost any matches as yet. What's the feeling following particularly the game against Stade Abidjan where they drew 1-1?
The feeling is not all the way positive. 5 points at this point is decent. Obviously, you're not out of it. You're in the running still to qualify. You might even top the group if you win the remaining games. But the feeling, Jay, is not particularly great because if you think about it, we drew with Al Ahly when they came to Orlando. We were all over them. And you think to yourself, Uguti, when you're playing at home and if Al Ahly look like that, you should at least score a goal, if not win the entire game. And then you go to Stade Abidjan and you play away and they don't look great themselves and you've got so many chances that you need to put away. You only get the one penalty that you score and they score an equalizer via a set piece or a cross, one of those things. But in between then there's a loss to Stades as well. So it's one of those things where we're not in the best of forms. We're not in the best place right now because it's starting to look like vintage Pirates. Good enough to get the results, but don't quite get over the line because we should have beaten Al Ahly. We should have beaten Stade Abidjan. We should have at least gotten a point against Stades, but we didn't. And so that 3-game run, if you look at that run in its entirety, is not necessarily the best place that Pirates want to be. And so if I look at that particular match with that context, you're not really happy because if you've got 9 points, you're probably guaranteed to qualify. And so we're not in that position because it's football. Just like how Pep Guardiola was shoehorned to win that game with 87 minutes on the clock, but he doesn't. We have 5 points in the group. We look better than the opposition, but you never know what's going to happen. You go to play Abidjan at home. Do they somehow grind out a draw? You play Al Ahly away. Do you get the points at that point in time? So I think we're in a good position, but I was expecting more. So long answer is that I'm not quite happy with the current results and the points that we have.
Well, halfway through the group, where the target for me, at least the target I set for Orlando Pirates, is that they need to get out the group. I think, of course, it could have been so much better. I think I'd take the result against Al Ahly because Al Ahly came here to park the bus, right? And by the way, on that note, a little bit, Al Ahly, who are the champions of Egypt and Africa, I tweeted about this. They came to Orlando and they parked the bus. Raja, who are the champions of Morocco, came to Loftus to park the bus. Miniam of, where are they from? DRC, against Sundowns. They came to Loftus and they had 6 players in their defensive line. In Orlando Pirates' game away to Stade Abidjan, you had Stade Abidjan holding on for long periods of that match against Orlando Pirates. Pirates should have put them away, but they were on top for large periods of that game. The continent respects South Africa. They know that we are big time, and I'm here to confirm that we are big time. I'm not saying that either Sundowns or Pirates are going to go on to win the Champions League. I don't know that as yet, but what I do know is that when that opposition outside of our borders are preparing to play matches against either one of these 2 South African teams, they show them the utmost respect. Now back to Orlando Pirates. In the match against Abidjan, they should have won that match. As I said, they were on top for large periods of that match. But it's maybe a little bit entitled sometimes to say that you should win a Champions League match away from home. But judging by what was playing out in front of us, I definitely think that they should have won that match. They had enough of the ball. They created enough chances. And as I say, they were on top in that game for large stretches. But having 5 points in 3 games is not the end of the world. You take it, right? Because you are undefeated. and you do know that you have, as much as you have maybe the toughest task in the group, which is going away to Al Ahly, you do also welcome a Stade Abidjan at home. I believe that might be the next match. And if you are judging based on the match that recently concluded between the London Pirates and Stade Abidjan, you feel in front of the home crowd, in front of those numbers, Escotini, where the momentum tends to carry Orlando Pirates forward, Pirates will do the job. Because in the Champions League, what you want to do, you want to win your home matches. Away from home, you want to avoid defeat. And so, yes, you did not win the one home game against Al Ahly, but you did win away against CR Belouizdad, right? And they also need to come here. So if we are looking at where the state of the group is right now, you'd say that Pirates are ahead of the curve in terms of the other teams within the group. Al Ahly is out on top, but you have to welcome CRP at home, and you were already beating them away from home. You have to welcome Stade Abidjan, who are the weakest of the teams in this group. And you take care of business at home, you are through to the next round. I believe just one win from those two matches that are coming at home will be enough, because Pirates at that point will be on 8 points. I don't quite see Belouizdad doing the business against Al Ahly to be able to pip Orlando Pirates. So it's not great. Of course, as I'm saying, especially you take the lead away from home. Sundowns did the same thing against AS FAR. You want to then consolidate and bring that home, right? But in the absence of that, if you were to give either one of these teams a draw away from home before they left the shores of South Africa, they take that. So it's not perfect, but I take it.
Yeah, I hear your argument in terms of if you were to give them a draw before they even travel, they'd probably take it. But as you said, when you look at the balance of play, when you look at the actual game and how things transpire, then you have to think about it and say, well, actually, they should have gotten more from this game. And I say that, Jay, because we created chance after chance. We didn't put it away. Put those chances away. We're in a situation where you're wondering when do we come good? When do these performances result in actual wins? When do we find a system that works? When do we find a plan B that gets us the results? Because it's all good and fair to play good football, but you have to convert. It's what Manqoba spoke about, and we'll speak about him quite shortly, in terms of he doesn't like showboating, because you'll showboat and then you concede a goal, then what? You showboat, you have fun, and you don't win the game, then what? So he'd rather have as many goals as possible in that game to confirm or to cement the result. And I say that, Jay, because this is arguably the best Pirate side you can put out, or at least when there are tough games or tough assignments. This is the formation that Rivera goes to, where he's got Manqoba up front, where he's got Hotto playing out as the winger sometimes. And so we tend to go to this formation when it comes to crunch time, and then when there are games that are more open, or we think that we've got an overwhelming advantage, then we play more progressive football without as many static players, if I could say, in the case of Manqoba. And I asked myself, because when I was watching that game, in terms of, because we had a lot of that ball, but we didn't create that many clear chances. I'm sure 3 or 4 is good enough to win a game, right? But sometimes you need to create more, because we've got players like Manqoba who are not as clinical. And I say that again, Jay, because I think the chances were created as a result of passes, and I know this is football, and I know it sounds quite arbitrary the way I'm saying it, but passes that led to chances versus us creating chances, if that ever sounds distinct from each other. By that I mean there's no one who is carrying the responsibility of creating chances. I'm going to go past players, I'm going to play the killer ball. They were playing chances hoping that there'll be a mistake at the back, and then we'll get a goal scoring chance. One such instance where he did not do that is when Fuking took on his man in the box and won us a penalty. And I think if we don't have players, because when we don't do that, then we get to say, where's Maswangai? Because without Maswangai, no one takes on that responsibility. And so if we don't do those things when Maswangai is there against Al Ahly, when he's there against against Belouizdad, we did win that game. You want to check yourself into, when Pirates do come good, what is it going to take? Because we do have possession, we do control the game, but we're not hitting the back of the net. So my concerns are based on that, Jay, which is when it is crunch time and Abidjan come to Escotini, will we score, or will we just dominate possession? Will we score? Will we dominate that game? Will we win that match? So my concerns are based on that, Jay, because it's good to have possession, it's good to control the game, but if you're not winning, who's to say it's not going to happen again? Who's to say it's not going to happen again in terms of you'll control the game again as you should at home, as you should with inferior opposition. But will you score is the question. And so that's the root of my concern. But overall, I think, as you're saying, we're poised. It's not a train smash. It's not done and dusted. There's still every chance for us to qualify. So fingers crossed it works.
I think you can look at it from the other side as well, Chuck, in the positive, because what has happened thus far this season, Pirates have lost against Stellenbosch, and who did they also lose against? Mngqithi as well in the cup, right? In the other games that they've played almost 20 games now. They've won a majority of them and they've drawn the others. And you can then also suggest that who's to say that we are going to play well and not take our chances and have a result. I forgot the game. I can't recall the opposition off the top of my head. Maybe you'll help me out. But where Orlando Pirates in that match, they had Saleng come through later on to win the game for Orlando Pirates at the start of the season, and that's the same way that they won the Nedbank Cup final last season. It's the same way they won the MTN 8 final this season. And maybe yes, we might be going a few months back now, and that form you might argue that it has deserted them. But it's there, and we've seen this team be able to do this, right? Where they are in the match, or then the opposition is in the match as well for the entirety of the match. And then come towards the end, they've got the BMT, they've got the plan, they've got the talent. You think of Urele and his move against Uzungu to then score that win in the cup final. And even when the referee was sleeping on the job, they were alert to the fact that here's a chance, and convert. So I've seen this Orlando Pirates team be able to get the result. It's a 90-minute game and get it at the end if needs be. You would love for them to secure the wins prior to that, right? You want to get to the hour mark and you 3-0 up and the game is done and dusted. But I do caution that once again in the Champions League, especially when you're playing against good opposition, you cannot expect to dominate a game from start to finish. What you want to do is when you do have the upper hand in the game, you want to make your advantage count, right? But you must also know that there'll be moments where this other team that was good enough to get into this elite competition will be on top. Will have moments. Will make you suffer. And there are other things at play as well. That there's been travel, and we know famously when you do travel on the continent, there's other things that happen, and then they do show up in the game. But I'd like to point out that with Orlando Pirates, I really do trust their coach. In that game against Abidjan, the disappointing thing was the result for me. Not everything else. I'll say the one other thing that was very disappointing for me. But in terms of the game plan, in terms of how he adjusted on the fly because of the game state, I was really impressed. And the most impressive part in the form of a player in terms of what the coach is doing for me is Dion Hotto, right? I've not been the greatest fan of Dion Hotto. I don't think Dion Hotto is the most talented guy going around. There are more talented guys at Orlando Pirates. We've spoken about them before, but I don't think there's a more important player for Orlando Pirates, and particularly for Coach Jose Rivero. That clip famously of the discord in the dressing room, right, to 307, and there's a camp of players who are asking, why does Dion Hotto always stay on? Why does Dion Hotto never come off? Or he's the coach's favorite, leading Dion Hotto himself to ask the coach to remove him. And the reason Coach Jose Rivero loves Dion Hotto so much and he keeps playing him is because he's so versatile. First of all, in terms of his physical capacity, Dion Hotto is able to go the entirety of the game. From minute 1 to the 90th and plus, he will be running up and down that pitch. Also, in terms of the tactical shifts that you can have with him, I noted in the game against Stade Abidjan that to begin with, Dion Hotto was playing a hybrid role in midfield and then as an auxiliary left back, forming a back five with the rest of the Pirates back four. And this was in response to Stade Abidjan sending numbers right forward. But then at the point where it's clear that Orlando Pirates do have the upper hand in this game, what Coach Jose Rivero does is he puts him at right wing. And what you then did see in responding to what you talk about in terms of chance creation, he did create chances, right? He is playing 1-2s on the edge of the box, he's shooting, or he's playing a 1-2, he's making a run behind the defense and trying to square it into into the penalty area for some of his teammates. What you also then see is you have then Hotto, who is now playing behind Dino van Rooyen, where the levels have shifted and they've exchanged, where Hotto is now the right back essentially, and this allows for Dino to go further ahead of him because Dino's quite good with the ball at his feet. He's quite good attacking, and he's in the central area. Why? Also because Hotto is creating that space by hugging the touchline. The other thing is when Hotto is at that right wing position, Nkota was allowed to also drift centrally. So you had the overloads centrally. You had Aurelia as well coming more centrally. What you didn't really have is the width on the left hand side. You had it on the right hand side, as I mentioned, because you had Hotto there, but on the other side there was no marauding left back joining the attack forward, and Rele was more central, and the chances did come. The chances also came in counter attack, and the issue there, which is the one other issue I had and I have with the Orlando Pirates, is Evidence Manqoba. I know all the good things that Evidence Manqoba does. I know how he involves his teammates. I know he's involved in link-up play. I know the good things he does outside the box. But if you're a striker, for me, your first job is to score goals. And in terms of scoring goals, you must, as a striker, have the mentality that you are there to do that job. You must be ruthless. The two chances that he had in that game, the one where I'd say he's through and goal, but it doesn't seem like that because he doesn't attack the goal. He decides to give the pass to Nkota and he shrugs responsibility. In the second half, literally a minute or two before Stade Abidjan equalizes, again, Evidence Manqoba is through on goal, and he slows down because he wants a teammate to catch up so that he can pass him the ball instead of, once again, attack the goal. Be the person who's going to take the responsibility for scoring the goal, because why? You are the number 9, you are the striker. So I feel as though if Orlando Pirates continue to create those moments in games, if it is instead of Evidence Manqoba in that position, Umabasa, then we're talking something totally different, because those two chances that Evidence Manqoba had, they're very good chances for me. And you also then had a situation where Aurelia Mofokeng was in the box and he had an opportunity to shoot, and you've noted, and I agree with you, that he's quite the ball striker, and that was not what you've come to expect from Aurelia, the shot that he gave, right? But you think to yourself, 9 out of 10 times he connects with that, he has a better connection, and that probably results in a goal. So it's not a guarantee that when you do then welcome Stade Abidjan at home, you're going to have a similar performance and you're just going to get over the line with the result just because of what happened in the last game. But we do take what has happened previously as a marker in terms of trying to predict what will happen in the future. And based on what happened in that game and also what didn't happen, I feel good about where Orlando Pirates are, and having seen them as well against CRP, even though they were hanging on in that second half, they did manage to do that. At home, I do feel it's a totally different thing. Even when they have to go away to Al Ahly are not going to park the bus when they're playing at home. They're going to come out. And once again, as I noted, in transition, Orlando Pirates are dangerous. So I trust the coach, Chuck. I do trust what he's doing with his players and with his tactics. And I do think a better day for the chief goal scorer, particularly if the chief goal scorer is somebody who is more adept at finishing those chances like Umabas. We're talking about results again for Orlando Pirates in the form of wins.
Yeah, I think well laid out. I think as much as you say trust the coach, my question that I have in my mind is when does Mabasa start versus Manqoba? Because it seems like Mabasa has been dislodged from the starting spot, and without much reason as to why. Because as we keep saying, Manqoba keeps getting those clear-cut chances. He doesn't put them away. Whereas case in point, right, as we said, when we go to the Nedbank Cup final, Manqoba starts. When we go to the MTN 8 final, Manqoba starts. But when Mabasa comes on, when the game is even, first-time shot he scores. And post-match interview he says he trusts himself with the first-time shot. He knows that he can score those things. Whereas you just listed as well, Luguti, when Manqoba's through on goal, he's like, where's the support? Like, guys, we don't need support. You are the guy that we give the ball to when we need to score. And those things don't quite happen. So it's about finding a solution, even in tight games or even in big games where Mabasa is our guy, because we need those shots on goal. We need those shots on target. We need them to be well connected when you want to test the keeper and not scuff the shot. So I think those kind of things are questions that you want to ask in terms of does the coach figure those things out? There's Saleh, there's Maswangai. When do they play? When don't they play? Are they injured? Sometimes there are things that we don't know in terms of what's going on in Pirates. But all in all, Jay, I think for me personally, as a Pirates fan, it's the idea that we started well with 3 points against the Belouizdad, and then we drew the next one, and then we drew the next one. Then our league form wasn't quite particularly great. But when you look at Sundowns, who did the opposite. They drew, and you're like, hey, Manqoba, what's going on? And then they drew again, and then finally, with the new coach at the helm, they win. And I think they are now on an upward trajectory in terms of how they feel about about their chances in the group. I think there's more optimism now versus Pirates, who I think started well, and now things are mellowing out or they're evening out a bit, and they have to find, I think, another piece of momentum or another bounce to then win again.
Speaking of Mamelodi Sundowns, Chuck, who actually are in the exact same position as Orlando Pirates, same number of points in the league and same number of points and results in the Champions League. Mamelodi Sundowns following the game against Raja Casablanca where they won 1-0. Of course, the first appearance on the sideline by one Miguel Cardoso, the newest coach in the PSL, the new coach of Mamelodi Sundowns, who replaced Manqoba Mngqithi in the midst of the previous week. Chuck, because we'd already recorded by the time the news of Manqoba came out, right? Two questions for you. First question: how did you react when you heard Manqoba Mngqithi has been fired from Mamelodi Sundowns? And what did you make of the first game under Miguel Cardoso by Mamelodi Sundowns in the Champions League?
I'll try to think about the second question, but first statement I'll say is that it's too early. It's game number one. I mean, and most of the personnel are likely to be the same. They played Sundowns-ish, but I'll find something distinct to say. But on Manqoba, Jay, I think I was shocked because as much as the results weren't actually coming, because he's the one responsible for the 2 draws in Africa thus far before Sundowns captured their first win at home. I didn't think they were terrible. I think they played similar to what like we said, Pirates have the same points as Sundowns in the league and they've got the same number of points in the CAF competition. They played just like Pirates did in both the games that I'm lamenting in terms of they dominated the play. They looked comfortable, but they didn't have the 3 points to show for their exploits. And I didn't think they looked particularly bad for Manqoba to get the sack. When he was about to play Carling Cup final, he said that, yeah, fine, there's history, and then there's the thing of playing in Bloemfontein against Clinton Larson, against, all these things that are against his side. But coming into the final, his side has scored like 11 goals in 3 games. That for me looks like a healthy team with that much rotated side. They were still finding the back of the net. And if you look at Ikram Reina's record of scoring 11 goals in 14 games, that's still under Manqoba Mngqithi. So as much as, yes, things weren't going particularly great, things were still good enough that you keep the manager, for me at least, right? I thought to myself, fine, if we dabble a bit in terms of what Cardoso was doing right on the day, Marcelo Allende was finding his feet again as one of the best players in the Sundowns shirt. He controlled the game effectively. When it comes to defensive work, I think he was mobile enough, but the responsibility wasn't on him solely. When it comes to netting play, I think he was running the show, and he was good again, which is something that we hadn't seen quite often enough under Manqoba, right? But there were other things that were going right with Manqoba when he was at the helm. I think the introduction of Okoza, whom we saw shine again for Cardoso's side against Raja. That's a find by Manqoba. Letlaku, who created a lot of good chances when he came on as well. That's a boy that Manqoba gave a chance to play. And so when I think about all the things that Cardoso is benefiting off right now, obviously he's got a good team. Obviously he himself picks the personnel, and mostly he's going to pick good players because Sundowns by and large are a good team. It's off the benefit of Manqoba because he introduces these new players. Can we say he signed Ikram Reina's? Or is that a
he
Fleming?
He said he pushed. But Manqoba Mngqithi said in terms of the signings that were made at Mamelodi Sundowns, number one, the ones that were maybe put together by the sporting director and others, he was given a chance to view them and to sign off on those. With Ikram Reina's specifically, Manqoba Mngqithi said he's the one who requested for Ikram Reina's to be signed. So that was Manqoba's signing. You can say that, yes.
And if you look at the fact that, fine, yes, there was a bit of a goal drought when you look at they didn't score against Mamelodi, so they didn't score enough. They didn't score in their 2 opening games of the CAF Champions League fixtures. Ikram Reina's, the guy that he lobbied for, was on a hot streak, right? So what I'm trying to say is that when Rolani at the back end of the season was facing Nedbank Cup finals, when he was facing CAF Champions League knockout phases, his team just didn't have enough goals, and it seemed like there weren't enough answers between Ribeiro no Shalulile, and he introduces Ikram Reina's, and I think he's somewhat solved it, even though there was a bit of that drought. So for me, he's had enough of a showing where you can say, okay, I can stick with that guy. But I don't know what level Sundowns want to be performing at. I don't know what more. Because think about it, Jay. They scored. Let's put it this way: they weren't as great as they could have been Mamelodi Sundowns, even after the new coach. And fine, it's his first game. He needs more time to implement his ideas. And I say that because Manqoba just needed one win himself to be in the very same position that they are in now. Whereas, okay, the group is not lost. We're still in control of our own destiny. And I don't think Manqoba was far from the win. I don't think he was. I don't think he was playing 50-50 games where you're like, oh man, ever since Manqoba's been at the helm, we're no longer this dominant side. They still were this dominant side, except for not winning the Colin Black Label Cup. Maybe that's a blemish on his name. But apart from that, in terms of what they were looking for in the season, in the league, you're number one. In the CAF competitions, you were still in charge of your own destiny because you had home games that you can win. So they pulled the plug, I think, prematurely. We'll see what Cardoso can bring to the party. But to answer the question directly, Jay, in terms of what do I think he looked like at the helm of Sundowns, I think they played well enough because the teams do come and they park the bus, as you said earlier on. They do respect Mamelodi Sundowns and their talents. What he did do well, I think, was playing Tebogo Mokoena, who I didn't see enough of him from what I'm used to. Because you know, Guti, when Tebogo Mokoena is playing his best football, he's my favorite Sundowns player. But not in this game. And I think they somewhat switched roles because you were lamenting with all the switching and changing. Rivaldo Kutsia is not quite the guy because of his lack of physical attributes or athletic ability. Now there's so much more to do for Allende. There's so much more to do for Mokoena or Obas or whoever's playing alongside him. Or the defenders as well get affected by all of that. And as a result, maybe then the players suffer in terms of what they look like on the pitch. But I think largely, Jay, Allende looked good. I think I can't really blame Ribeiro or the coach. I think it's a matter of the low block. He was not as effective as you'd like him to be in that particular game. I don't blame the coach, neither do I blame the player. I think credit to AS Far because the middle of the park was congested. Sundowns had to play out wide, and I think in the second half when they got their footing, a better foothold of the game, when they were creating better chances because they went out wide to Divine Lunga, to Letlaku, to all the players who play out wide, and they started to put crosses in or they were playing cutback balls. Then they looked better. But while they were trying to go through the middle, which I think that's what they were doing initially, that he got wrong, but kudos to him because he was able to adapt. I think that's the other good thing about a manager. When things are going wrong, what are your solutions? And are those solutions effective? Or is it just another way of hitting the same brick wall? So it was a different way and they found solutions, they found answers. But all in all, Jay, I can't say I'm disappointed, but I think game number one is a bit too early because he's still benefiting off Manqoba's work. But I think he himself has got time to acquit himself better. And then we'll see.
So with regards to Mamelodi Sundowns getting rid of Manqoba Mngqithi, they didn't intend to make him the head coach to begin with, in my opinion, because when they parted ways with Rulani, the suggestion is that Rulani didn't quite cut it. And when you ask the question, what are you talking about, following another league campaign where they win the DSTV, at the time, DSTV Premiership, now the Betway Prem, and with a record number of points and having been to 2 cup finals, having lost those 2 cup finals, having been to a Champions League semi-final back-to-back years for the first time since you got there in 2016. Actually, Sundowns haven't been to back-to-back semi-finals in the CAF Champions League. And you part ways with him because he did not meet the KPI of winning that second star. That then says what you are going to replace Rulani with is a coach who you believe is best placed to win you the CAF Champions League. That certainly was not Manqoba Mngqithi, particularly because when Orlando Pirates defeated Mamelodi Sundowns 3-0 in the MTN 8 semi-finals a few seasons ago, the reaction from the Sundowns management was to demote Manqoba Mngqithi, was a co-head coach with Rulani Mokoena at that time, and to promote Rulani above him as the solo head coach. So from just that point, that is not a management team that believes in Manqoba Mngqithi as the guy to head up Mamelodi Sundowns. So when they made the announcement, they didn't even make the announcement. When Manqoba revealed to us, because the media kept on asking, are you the head coach? What is actually happening? That it is indeed Manqoba who is at the helm. I was surprised, and I had a feeling that this is not what they wanted to do when they were seeking their options following Rulani Mokoena. And even those talks with Rulani Mokoena probably dragged a little longer than Sundowns would have wanted because they were caught unprepared in terms of the next hire. So they went in-house. They went with Manqoba. And I think then Manqoba was on a hiding to none, Chuck. He needed to work miracles in order to win over a group of people who had previously thought that he's not good enough for the job, right? And he would have done well to win either the MTN 8 or at least get to the final. And then definitely against Imakesi to bring that one over the line. Because if you look at the body of work outside of those two tournaments, as you just outlined, top of the log in the Prem, one of the best starts Sundowns, we're talking about Mamelodi Sundowns here, have ever had. And also in the Champions League, yes, they hadn't managed a win as yet, but also hadn't lost. They took the opportunity that they were always going to make with regards to Manqoba Mngqithi. They didn't see him as the head coach. The confusing part for me, and what then Sundowns have done, which they better hope works out for them, that is the board, is that they go for Miguel Cardoso. What's confusing for me about that, Chuck, is if you got rid of Rulani Mokoena because he did not win you the Champions League, if you're going to go for a coach who you believe is going to win the Champions League, and again, the greatest indicator of what someone is able to do in the future is what they've done previously. This coach, Miguel Cardoso, has never won the Champions League. And yes, he knocked Sundowns out. Maybe that was the interview that they needed. He, with his Esperance team, knocked Sundowns out in the CAF Champions League semi-finals. But then he lost in the final against Al Ahly, right? So what Manqoba Mngqithi went on national radio talking about as well in terms of his disappointment is that there's the Club World Cup coming up, and he feels as if what Sundowns want to do is go with a European coach because as South Africans, we've got that complex that we do trust people from outside more than we do our own. And that'd be very disappointing if indeed that is the reasoning behind Sundowns making this move. In terms of they wanted to hire a coach who's going to win them the Champions League, it's confusing for me if you go for a coach who, yes, he's got European pedigree and his best work was with Rio Ave many years ago, seven or 8 seasons ago now, where he led them to fifth in the qualification for the Europa. But in every subsequent job after that in Europe, he didn't last more than 4 months. He was in fact fired 3 times in the space of a year. One time, and he took a long break between coaching before ending up at Esperance. And Esperance, who he won the league title with, is his only success on his CV, right? And then Esperance parted ways with him now in October because they were not happy with the results. And that is the coach that Sundowns went and picked up. The only reason I can think that you go for him, even if his CV doesn't say he's going to win, he's definitely going to win you. He can't guarantee that. But even though his CV does not suggest that this is the man to win you a Champions League, is because of what he said in his opening press conference when he was speaking about his style of play. And at Sundowns, there are people who understand that, and there are people who want to play a certain way. And we saw parts of that in the game against Raja Casablanca, where they were trying to get through the middle, right? The shortest distance to goal is to come through the middle. But it was congested over there. And then you want to see, what do you do when that happens? Because 2 things that stood out for me in terms of his approach to the game was the fact that in as little passes as possible, you want to get the ball forward, and 2, you also want to win the ball up high. There was a lot of pressing up top and counter pressing when Sundowns lost the ball. And then, as you say, the question is, now that it is congested in the middle and you can't attack through here, what then is the plan? You see Divine Lunga is offering that width, and eventually the Sundowns players are finding him on that left hand side. You see when the young man Letaku comes on, that he's the one who creates the goal, right? It is route 1, like a brilliant find from Ronan Williams, and he's on the wing, and the goal comes on the wing. And what I liked is that, okay, it seems as if the coach is not too rigid to go away from his original plans based on what is happening in the match itself. But he has to win the Champions League for me, because if he doesn't, and he keeps his job, I don't understand what the reasoning of the Sundowns management is, Chuck. Because if I speak for a moment as a Sundowns fan, my fear is that this would plunge Sundowns back to those days where we kept on hiring these European coaches, Bostoichkov, Abonyeskins, and all these names, Bokamondi, and there wasn't great success. We spent a lot of money, but there was no great success. And only when Sundowns went with Pizzo, and Pizzo became Rolani and the 3 wise men, was there stability and success. because as Rulani warned, in terms of dynasties, in terms of kingdoms, they fall apart slowly but surely. It doesn't happen all at once. It's little moves that you do, gancane. And for me, the Mamelodi Sundowns management have clearly backed the sporting director, Fleming Berg. It really was a tussle for power, where is it the sporting director, is it the coach? And they've now backed the sporting director, and his decisions now have to pay off, because if suddenly Sundowns are no longer the team that has been as dominant as they've been in the PSL and don't go on to win the Champions League, then his head needs to roll.
When did Fleming join Sundowns?
I can't recall now.
We're seeing more of him like of late in the last 2-3 seasons. We're seeing or hearing about him more often.
And we're hearing from him a lot more.
And you're seeing YouTube videos in terms of here's how I signed the Ribeiros and whoever's, and they're like, hey, dude, I didn't know, but okay, thanks. Jay, I want to ask again, as a Sundowns fan, when Manqoba was fired, obviously this was the Ribeiro's first trophy, 1 of 5. We didn't know how good Pirates were, maybe expecting Sundowns to win because it was the MTN8 semi-finals at that point, and you're expecting them to come over the line there, and obviously he got demoted, Rulani steps up. But when you look at the fact that Rulani faltered because Pirates have won 5 cups and they're the second best team in the country, if you're to lose to anyone, these are the guys who are going to hand you a defeat. When you look at the MTN8, maybe then for Manqoba as well, Stellies aren't bad. They're the third best team in the country as well. The Mngqithi one is the one where we were like, you guys should have won that one.
But Mngqithi beat Orlando Pirates as well.
Yes. And there was their cup.
Fagukesi. What can you do against that, Chuck?
And so my question is, now that Manqoba is gone, are you someone who thinks it's gonna be better, or does this not make sense to you as a fan in terms of how they are moving? Because I know you did detail in terms of if we went from this manager to this manager, then it's not A, B equals C, because this C equals an A in a different way, because you don't quite understand if this guy was better than the guy, if Rulani was better than Manqoba, whom he replaced according to your decision, why then replace Manqoba with Rulani? But then if Manqoba is still not
why
doing,
then replace Rulani with Manqoba?
Why did they replace Rulani with Manqoba, right? And also then, if Rulani was giving you that output of record number of points and goals and whatnot, and you're just going to take Manqoba and replace Rulani with Manqoba, if Manqoba is still doing what Rulani was doing well enough to keep him in the job, and you won the Champions League, why take the guy who didn't or hasn't won the Champions League to replace him? Are you guys going backwards, or do you think it's just a different direction?
So as I said, Chuck, I think it didn't matter what Manqoba did. He was always going to lose his job because he was not the man that they wanted first and foremost. The only thing he could have done is really win the MTN8 and the Carling Cup. I think even both of them actually. Winning the Carling Cup final would have made it really hard for Mamelodi Sundowns to make that call, and especially losing against Mngqithi. Yes, we do mention Mngqithi did beat Orlando Pirates in the first round, but still they're a newly promoted team. That gave them the doorway, right, to move away from him, because as I mentioned, Coach Miguel Cardoso only became available now after Esperance parted ways with him. So the suggestion is that on their coaching search, they didn't find someone who they felt has the caliber to take over Sundowns. My thing with Mamelodi Sundowns, Chuck, is they should not have fired Rulani. Right? You had a coaching prodigy, and whatever you want to say about him being Pep Light and some of his more head-scratching moments in front of the media and his beefs with coaches, whatever the case may be, you had as Rulani was careful to remind us, a 37-year-old in the job who had served an apprenticeship under Upito Mosimane. He'd had his growing pains at Orlando Pirates and then Chipa, and then coming back to Mamelodi Sundowns, and he came back to Mamelodi Sundowns once again as an assistant, and he had the humility to having been the head coach of Orlando Pirates to come back in that stead. And then when Pito leaves, he's part of the triumvirate, right, of him, Steve Kompela, and Manqoba. And then when you go away from Manqoba, you go to him, and he wins, right? Like, it starts off like a house on fire, and he wins. And when I say he wins, I mean he won the PSL title twice, and on the last goal almost was invincible. And yes, Chuck, Mamelodi Sundowns did lose those cup finals, and I came here at the end of the season and I said, the question that Rulani and his team need to answer for me is what's their mentality like? What's their BMT like? Because in the league, in the games that maybe are not the highest of pressure, they're able to deliver. But as soon as we get into cup situations and it's semifinals and it's finals and the lights are turned on the brightest, they become lesser versions of themselves. But I believe that Rulani needed to be given the opportunity to answer those questions. Because as I'm saying, once again, you had a young coach who is maybe the most brilliant mind in South African football. And he already had a history of winning, and he was trusted, and he loved loved by his players, and he loved his players as well. And he was part of the fabric of that team going back to when he was involved in development. And for me, you just keep Rulani Chuck. You keep him until Hugo Broos decides to step down and Bafana come calling. Because you look around, you cannot make a concrete argument that there is a better coach than Rulani Mokoena. Does he have a Champions League on his CV? No, he doesn't. But neither does the man who ultimately you've replaced him with, right? Because for me, if Sundowns were to go away from a Rulani, they should have gone to a coach who has won Champions League titles, but none of those coaches were available. So when you have the young coach entrenched and the one season is playing the diamond, the other season where he feels maybe the diamond is exploitable, he's playing chameleon football. And who knows what he was going to have figured out, because he kept figuring things out. That's why when we get to the City talk, like you don't move away from Pep Guardiola, because who is better suited to be able to come up with solutions for the problems that you are facing, if not the best mind going around? And that is what Rulani was, I believe, is. And as I'm saying, you were sorted. You were sorted for the next decade if he wanted to stay and if you wanted to keep him. But yeah, I don't know if there's a sense of some entitlement that by now you should absolutely have won another star. If you are in the job in that first season or in the first 2 seasons where you're in the job, you have to deliver a second Champions League title. Because again, now you've put Cardoso in the job, and what guarantees do you have that he's going to go and win the Champions League? Now he might go and do it, and we'll be back here saying, well, you see, and that's why Sundowns decision makers make the decisions and we sit here and talk about it. But Sundowns were in a very sweet spot with Rulani Mokoena, and as soon as they went away from that and seemingly they didn't have a backup plan, their backup plan work out immediately. Then they go to Manqoba, and now you're firing the coach within less than 20 games into the season, and you are hiring a coach where there are question marks around him, and he has to defend. Cardoso has to defend that. Don't judge me by my CV. What are we talking about here? And I've heard the argument that, yeah, Coach Jose Rivero was said to be a plumber and he's proved everybody wrong. That's the exception, right? You don't build rules. I keep saying this. You don't build rules based on exceptions, because what do we have to go on in terms of the success you're going to deliver if we can't look at what you've done before and say, you see, that's exactly why he was hired. So Sundowns should have stuck with Rulani. That's where I still am at this moment. But Rulani is gone and the decisions have been made, and Sundowns needed the win in Coach Miguel Cardoso's first game against Raja, and they got that. And we saw him very busy on those sidelines. And maybe, hopefully for the Sundowns faithful, there is more to come.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Chuck, change of segment, change of shirts, because this is how we roll. No, in fact, we've had quite some trouble with recording, and this is, of course, a new day, hence you see the change of shirts. But we dive straight back into the action, Chuck, looking at the Manchester derby, right? Manchester United came through with a 2-1 win away from home over there at the Etihad against the struggling Manchester City, who've now only managed just 1 win in 11 games. And looking at Pep Guardiola's Manchester City, do you believe Pep Guardiola is still the man who's going to be able to figure this out and turn it around?
As bad as things are right now, I think you'd be foolish to bet against Pep, because I think, there's cycles in football where you're absolutely on top of the world, where whatever you touch turns to gold, and there are times where in the ruts that try as you may, things just don't come off. But I think even in this rut, you have to put faith in Pep Guardiola. I think obviously he signed his contract extension while they were in the middle of this poor run, and it hasn't changed, right? But I think he's still the guy. I know there are injuries at play. I know I'm piling up the excuses in his favor, right? But I think at some point they will turn a corner and we'll forget that this even happened, because there was a time, I think, last season where they were trailing and they looked out of it as well, where Arsenal were firm favourites. But
No, Chuck. No,
that's 2
please.
seasons ago.
That is 2 seasons ago. There was no point last season where Arsenal were firm favourites. It was Liverpool, in fact.
You know what? You're right. And then Klopp fell away in his in the last dance season, and there was the one prior. But in both of those seasons, they came back where I had said, I think last year, which they're looking a bit off color. They're not vintage City, but even then they were good enough to win the title. This is far from that. This is even worse than that, right? They look mid-table. They're dropping towards the middle of the table, whereas United were. It was actually a middle of the table clash. Funny enough. But speaking about Pep J, I think he's still the guy to turn things around, because I think when you've invested so much in these players, when they know so much football from you, and their understanding as a team is the Pep Guardiola idea. When it comes back right again, I think you want to go back to those ideas. When it comes back right again, you want to go back to that the best footballing mind in the world. So I think he's still the guy. It's hard to see it now, but I think you don't move from Pep Guardiola, because where do you go?
Where do you go, indeed? This is fascinating for me, right? We've never seen a Pep Guardiola coached team be in quite a rut like this one. I mean, when you look at the metrics, in quite a number of them, they're the worst team in the EPL right now for a little while now. But Chuck, I can't help but think to when Pep Guardiola came to the EPL, right? And in that first season, I believe he finished 4th. And the narrative was, this is the EPL. This is not the Bundesliga with Bayern Munich. Yeah. This is not La Liga with one of those two powerhouses, Barcelona in his case. Here, it's competitive, and you're not just going to come here and rule the roost. And then he came back with Centurions, right?
Yeah.
This is what Pep Guardiola does. Again, as I'm saying, my fascination is because Pep Guardiola has never coached a struggling team. You could never have, even in that first season, labeled his Manchester City side as struggling. You know, this kind of form from a Pep Guardiola-led team is something we're unaccustomed to. He's also unaccustomed to it, because when you check his behaviors and some of the things he said in front of the media, he cuts a figure of someone who's rattled and who maybe has lost his head, you know. And you would have thought, based on his history, based on Pep Guardiola's resume, he would have figured it out by now, because this is what he does, right? He gives us Lionel Messi in a false 9. He gives us the greatest version of the tiki-taka. He gives us Philip Lahm playing in the midfield. He gives us Cancelo, who's inverting in the midfield. He gives us John Stones inverting in the midfield. He gives us Gvardiol, who is a second striker, essentially. So you would have thought that it wouldn't get to these levels, and this is uncharted waters for Pep Guardiola and a team that is coached by the Spaniard, right? But as I'm saying, what we have seen, if there's any kind of evidence, particularly from his time in England, he's been able to figure it out. Even when you think about how long it took him to win a Champions League title in England, or his next Champions League title after leaving Barcelona, eventually he did it. You know, in the previous final he got to with Manchester City against Chelsea, you could accuse him, as he tended to do when he got to the latter stages, of overcoaching. But then eventually he gets into a final and he wins it, and he wins a treble as well. So in the little instances where we've seen teams coached by Pep Guardiola face some adversity, the man who I deem to have the greatest mind in football history has been able to tinker. This is what he does, right? He is the tinker man, and I earnestly expect that he's gonna turn this around. The other thing, which is the criticism leveled against Pep Guardiola by those who say maybe hold on anointing him as the GOAT, is that he always has resources, and he is in the most resourced team out there. Now we'll see what the charges mean for Manchester City, but if all things hold equal and they still are able to go out into the market and spend as they've been able to do previously, what Pep Guardiola does then have in front of him is the opportunity to refresh this team, right? To build another dynasty after the first iteration of Pep Guardiola and Manchester City, winning the local treble, winning the treble, and everything that they've won, 4 league titles in a row, that now he has an opportunity to build a new team, essentially. And it's not as if he's going to struggle for the money to go out and demand whoever he wants out there. Famously, before City won everything, Pep Guardiola kept on buying defenders. He bought defenders, and it felt as if it didn't matter if they didn't work out, because City were going to go out into the market and just buy another defender for another £50 million. So if that happens, alongside the fact that, as I'm saying, Pep Guardiola is someone who's always managed to figure things out, even though this is the most extreme case of that, then Pep Guardiola is going to figure it out.
I've got a question, Jay, because while you're speaking, I'm thinking to myself, right, we've never seen Pep struggle this much. But also, we saw him after his stint at Barcelona take a break. And when you look at the battle that he's had toe-to-toe with Jurgen Klopp, and then Arteta joins in late, these league titles have not been easy. As much as, yes, he put 100 points on the board, he's never really felt like he's had the league in the bag by January in all of those league wins. It's always been pushed. The league titles where he's winning on the last day via Gundogan. There's league titles where Liverpool's taking it away from them. And it's all been tough. And I'm thinking to myself, is he not fatigued? Is it because this is his longest period in charge of a football club that maybe this is why things are going down? Do you think there's a counter to that in terms of actually there's more in the tank? Because we've never seen him in charge for this long, and maybe that coincides with him struggling?
He must be fatigued, right? This is why Klopp took a step away from the game. The rigors of management at the very top, and I say this as though I'm someone who's managed at the very top, but from everything that we hear from people in those positions, it's hard to manage football clubs, especially in the age that we are in. And I think, Chuck, that's why you hear Pep Guardiola coming out and saying, I've signed on for 2 years with Manchester City, but these are my last 2 years coaching a club. What I think we're going to see in Pep Guardiola's future is that he's going to manage a national team. The hot bet is on Brazil, the Brazilian national team. So we'll see what happens after the next 2 years with Manchester City. I think in particular, if he does manage to turn around, win even just another Premier League title, he'll feel as though he did his job. You know, he didn't leave them in a lurch to figure things out. So yes, Chuck, I do think there is fatigue. I think there's fatigue overall with that project, right? Because they went hard for so many years, and as you say, they were pushed to go get 99 points because the other team is on 97 points. Go get 93 because they've come back on 92 points. I think the 2 seasons where it was maybe easiest, they walked the league the year that there was insurance, because they finished 19 points ahead of Manchester United. And then the 1 season where they finished with 86 points, that was not as tough as the other seasons, right? Whereas then you have to come back against Arsenal, and last season you have to come back against Liverpool, and Arsenal are showing their teeth once again, and you have to maintain your form in the run-in. So I can understand why there's burnout throughout, even the injuries that those players are experiencing. I've always called a myth around depth. Honestly believe, as much as we've seen Pep roulette, right, in terms of the majority of games, there is an established 11 who play. And even if you might say they're not playing 55, 60 games a season, the fact that they've been playing high-level competition where they know that they are playing to win every single competition that they're in, that is Manchester City, that takes a different toll as opposed to just turning up. And there are different pressures, right? But I do think that that level of pressure where you've done it, now do it again. What keeps coming to you every season is do it again. And eventually you don't have anything to give anymore, right? And something has got to give, something has got to change. And what I think, and always the easiest thing is the turnover of the player. Well, the easiest thing is always the turnover of the manager if you've got the squad. But I think the squad has aged out of their peak, and whereas the manager is still the manager, and he's still Pep Guardiola. You know, give him a new set of players, and I believe he goes and he does it again. I think also that would refresh him, that opportunity to work with a new squad and to form them into whatever image he feels in 2024 or 2025, 26, 27 going forward is the correct one in order to attack the landscape of the game at that point.
Yeah, I think we're witnessing what Erik ten Hag said. Unfortunately, he himself was not in the job long enough to witness his word come to pass, because an era has come to an end. As far as Liverpool and Klopp is concerned, we'll see what
it's taken a break. The era has taken a break as opposed to coming to an end. But Chuck, you speak of Erik ten Hag. The man who replaced him did the job that Oli also used to famously be able to do, right? He came away with the win against Manchester City in the derby. There's been reports, WhatsApp messages going out from the coach to a Garnacho to a Marcus Rashford who might be on the transfer list now. We are hearing that Manchester United have put out the word that if you want this player, he is up for sale. What do you make of Ruben Amorim? And we a month into his tenure now, following the win in the Manchester derby and everything else that he's doing in the manners in which he's managing Manchester United?
I think he's someone with a clear identity, and what Ruben Amorim wants is what Ruben Amorim wants to get from his players. Hasn't quite gotten it at this point in time because the players are thinking on their feet and they're trying to figure out what this puzzle looks like with this 3-4-2-1 3-4-2-1 formation. I'm just trying to think of the two at the base, but nonetheless, 3-4-2-1, which they seem lost in terms of how to play it initially, and now they're getting into the squad and they're doing it, and it's a lot of rotation in terms of the players who are playing in that side, a lot of positional changes in terms of where they start out and where they finish off, and so a lot of it is changing, and we're seeing a lot of turnover in terms of rotation of players as well. I see the idea. I see what he wants to do. But more than that, Jay, more than the results, more than the style of play, I see a man who is quite strict, a man who is clear in his ideas in terms of communicating them to the players and as well as the media, because you understand that he wants the team to play at a particular level, to play at a particular standard. It also said that, number one, understand there'll be pain in this period of transition. Prepare for it. Don't think we won in the Europa League, things are fine. No, we were lucky with that one. Don't look at the results, look at the performance. Against Everton, we won and we should have won by a bigger margin. But be prepared for bigger changes and for bigger growing pains. And so I think those growing pains are him saying to Rashford and Garnacho, you don't quite meet the standard, not this week. Maybe next week give it another crack, we'll be in the side, but this week, nope. Casemiro, okay, next week. And it keeps on giving. I think at this point in time, because even Anthony has gotten game time. Everyone's gotten a free trial. Everyone has been given time to show and impress. And after a while, if you go to January and you don't cut it, it's because you've been given a fair chance, number one. I think one is fair about that, because it's not a matter of I see them in practice, and I'm seeing them in practice and during game time to see how do you acquit yourself? Do you perform or do you flounder? When the game needs you to run more, do you show up and show to be the athlete you are? So I think, Jay, I'm impressed by him giving us the idea that you have to work hard for wins. It's not going to be just talent. Talent is not enough to win you games. And I think that's why the noise around Marcus Rashford is growing so much, because under Ten Hag, when he scores those 30 goals, I think it's off the back of talent. And now that the talent is not necessarily at its peak, like last year and like last season and this season, then you're like, where's the hard work? Garnacho, when you're not having the best of games, where's the hard work? Are you tracking it back? Are you mopping up someone else's dirty work if they lose the ball? Are you fighting for the team? And I think that idea has become central, has become more clearer to everyone, because now we're playing three at the back. We can't then say, Harry, hoof it up. Harry is by himself.
Who had a great game, by the way. That is Harry Maguire.
Yeah.
Don't just shoot past and just name drop Harry without mentioning that he had a great game in that Manchester derby. Harry Maguire.
We're growing to these things, like how we
most expensive defender of all time, proving his worth in the Manchester derby.
Like we grew to appreciate Mngqithi or 7. It'll come. But I think, kudos to him. He had a great game, Jay. But I think, all in all, I think the embodiment of what Ruben Amorim wants is what we see in Amad Diallo. He's got the talent, right? But sometimes you're like, I should have passed. You shouldn't have tried to dribble there. But he's always there tracking after the ball, always trying to make space, always trying to make an extra pass. He is just going and going and going. And I think if all the players applied themselves like Amad did, you don't need to have the same amount of talent. But if you apply yourself like he did, I think then you get the win. So I think what I'm seeing in Ruben Amorim is a demand for more. It's a demand for high standards, Jay, because we are a mid-table team, unfortunately. That's where Man United are. They're 13th or 14th or wherever they are right now. They're not in the top half. So if we apply ourselves, then we'll get the reward. And I think that's the idea.
Yeah, Chuck, what I'm really liking from Ruben Amorim, and I want to front load us by saying this, right? It might not work out, because with every single manager who has followed Sir Alex Ferguson at Manchester United, it hasn't worked out, but that cannot keep you from trying, right? And what I am seeing from Ruben Amorim, which I am liking, he is the boss. You have no questions in terms of who is steering the bus, because in clubs whereby the inmates are running the asylum, you will not get success. If you think about the iconic teams of the past in whatever era, you think about their managers, right? When you think about Jose Mourinho's Chelsea, you know Jose Mourinho was the man. You think of Sir Alex Ferguson's Manchester United, he is the boss. These players to this day call him the boss, you know. And you think Pep Guardiola as well, we just spoke about him. And now with Ruben Amorim, even if you want to take it, Chuck, to a situation which hasn't delivered the kind of success as I'm mentioning with those all-time greats, Mikel Arteta, right? There is stability at Arsenal following the rebuild of Mikel Arteta because mainly of how he started his rebuild. Arsenal had given a contract to Aubameyang. He was the captain, but then when it didn't work out, Mikel Arteta was very happy to let him go. Similar thing with Ozil. Ozil is sitting in the stands under an umbrella because Mikel Arteta had made the decision that Ozil is not in his plans. We see it in the early stages of that. We heard in the off-season with Maresca, with a Chelsea now who's flying high, second in the league, where he told Sterling, a man who's had great success in this league, that I don't have any plans to use you, you know. And as the board, as the upper management of the club, you have to back the man that you hired to do the job, because it's not just what is he doing in terms of the coaching side of it, in terms of his tactical approach, but it is both those things. We are seeing the blueprint in terms of, okay, we see how Manchester United want to play. It might not yet be perfect. It might not beat City, put 4 goals past City as Sporting did, but they were humming at that point. But you're excited about the fact that it can get there. The situation is stable, right, against the big team. It's the same thing you saw against Arsenal away at the Emirates. Arsenal didn't blow Manchester United away. Manchester United didn't create all that many chances. And at this stage, which is the first phase of the rebuild, what we're seeing in terms of the gameplay is that it's not very adventurous, but it's stable. It's safe, right? There are large moments of the games where you're controlling the game, but you need to do that because you need it to stop the bleeding. Before we go express ourselves, before we go put teams to the sword, before we have designs on playing the kind of game where we are playing on the front foot wherever we are playing, because we are Manchester United. We haven't been Manchester United for the longest time, so can we get this right to begin with? And that's what the 3 centre backs, the wing backs and the 2 DMs give you, right? And in the same way, Chuck, it's what then you do away from the field of play, how you manage the players, the personalities, how you manage the team, where this is the direction I am going. If you buy in, you're coming along with me, and there are great rewards ahead. If you don't want to, we're not going to have an argument because I'm not the boss and you are the boss. There's only one boss here, and there's one voice that is going to prevail, and that is mine. Again, this is why I've been brought in to do the job. And those who are in line, and you're seeing it with guys giving their absolute all on the pitch. I was looking at Kobe Mainoo, who is most famous in his young career because of what he does with the ball, right? But you see him in the duels. You see him winning those duels. You see him going into those tackles. And the attitude is right. So he is getting things right at this stage. If we're just talking about this stage, I don't know in 2 seasons' time or 3 seasons' time if Manchester United are challenging for the Premier League or the Champions League. But if you are tracking the trajectory at the very, very early stage, and I do repeat, it is the very early stages, but if we are asking the question, what do you want to see at this point, right? At the formation stage of the new manager being in the job, what we're seeing and how his team are set up, what we are hearing from him and the reports in terms of how he's running the club, it's exactly what you want to see.
So, Jay, speaking about the same said league, right, where Chelsea are second and City have fallen away desperately and they look very poor. Liverpool have dropped points, right, to Newcastle, to Fulham, and the one team that has capitalized is Chelsea and not Arsenal. And we thought all along as the season began that the guys who were going to challenge for the title would be Liverpool, Arsenal, and Man City. And Chelsea, maybe with the talent, would be there and thereabout, but wouldn't think they'd be second, having gone past Arsenal. What do you think has gone wrong with Arsenal? Because Arsenal at this point, I mean, at some point they scored 5, right? They looked good against West Ham and looked good in the Champions League. But at this point in time, when you look at some of their games, their set piece dependent, and without that, not much creativity is coming. Or if not that, let's at least give them credit and say they use Saka, who's one of their outlets, but they can't rely on Martinelli on the other side or Trossard on the other side when he does play. What do you think has gone wrong, though? This is what Arsenal are at this point in time when they're supposed to be chasing.
Risk aversion, Chuck. That is the name of the game with Mikel Arteta's Arsenal. So, if I go back to Ruben Amorim for a moment, right? And this is what we saw with Thomas Tuchel at Chelsea, even though he did win the Champions League. There is a point where you can't just play to not lose. There's a point where we need to take the training wheels off and we need to go. The players need to have a sense that they can express themselves. It's actually the counter of how Jurgen Klopp built Liverpool. Because when Jurgen Klopp came into Liverpool, he gave them the freedom to play. But they were conceding a lot of goals, and that's why they weren't challenging for any titles really. But they were playing attractive football. But he was building that within his attackers. And then what he then did is, this is Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, got Alisson, got Van Dijk, and he got Fabinho, and he strengthened then the spine. And defensively they were sound, but they already had the attack. That's why they could go on and dominate games. Arteta and Ruben Amorim, to an extent, are coming at it from the other side. But there is a threshold where you have to get away from the risk aversion, where you have to take those risks, where you have to take those chances. Chuck, when you watch Arsenal and when you think about the additions at Arsenal this season, Mikel Arteta keeps buying defenders.
Yeah.
I mean, even the striker that you bought, he's a defensive striker. He's like Kai Havertz, who is the starting number 9, right? He's not all out attack. He's not a someone who is thirsty for goals. And then you have Gabriel Jesus, who came out and told us that that's not his main job. Like, scoring goals is not his main job. And then you watch Arsenal, and outside of Bukayo Saka as well as Martin Odegaard, there's not much. You've got a Declan Rice who's playing as your 6, and because in the game against Everton, where that game was a 0-0 draw, you have Declan Rice in there, and you have Mikel Merino. We haven't seen much from Mikel Merino since his join, and where Declan Rice is concerned, Declan Rice can't even receive a ball facing his goal and turn. And you don't have Thomas Partey in there, and I know there might be some other issues with Thomas Partey off the field, and maybe that's why he's not playing. But if we're just strictly talking from a football sense, he's probably been the second best player, if not the best player for Arsenal this season, and Arsenal cannot play without him. And when you look at the makeup of the team, one, they do not have anyone who is a natural goal scorer. Saka scores goals, right? But he's not an out-and-out goal scorer, and you need that guy. You don't have that in Havertz. You don't have that in Jesus. You don't have that in Martinelli. Odegaard gave you 15 goals a few seasons ago, and I said at the time that that's when Arsenal needed to win the league, because all of these players seem to hit some peaks in terms of goal output that they're going to give in their careers. I don't quite see Odegaard scoring 15 goals a season like Frank Lampard on a regular basis. And so if Odegaard is not scoring and he's just the chief creator, and Bukayo Saka is supposed to be the chief goal scorer, but he doesn't give you the same kind of output as maybe Mo Salah does, then you're looking around and asking the question, who's going to be scoring goals? And then if it's not facilitated by the players themselves, Chuck, the approach is very defensive. It's as I'm saying, it's very risk. It's risk aversion. Focused, and Mikel Arteta said as much, that we don't want to take risks. And unfortunately, you're going to have situations where you have 0-0s against Everton, or if you're winning the game, you are relying on scoring headers from set pieces.
I mean, if I think about a couple of seasons back, Jay, where I said to you that, you know what, if we beat Crystal Palace and then we go and do the business against Arsenal at the Emirates, then we're back in the title run. And obviously, all of that didn't happen. We lost all those 6 points. The point is this, Jay, that we went to the Emirates and we were blown away, not necessarily the scoreline, but Arsenal were that much better. You're like, okay, these are the guys who were the contenders and these are the guys who were the pretenders. And obviously we got the choke job, maybe the run-in with Arsenal, and then with Arsenal and City and Liverpool falling away at the end last season. And then to this. That's why it's disappointing for me in terms of you guys had the goals. Fine, it was coming from all over the place and you wanted a recognized goal scorer to keep or to carry the burden of the goals. Fine, you wanted maybe more attacking reinforcements, but you guys were at the peak in terms of what it takes to run Man City close. and then to this. So that for me is quite surprising. When you look at the game against Arsenal, against United that you speak about, it was a cagey affair. You're like, you guys are playing at home. You guys have got something to win because our season is already in tatters. That is Man United, but Arsenal have got a league on the line in terms of chasing for it, and they had the first half that they did. If you take away those two corners, what did they actually bring to the party? And that for me is worrying. That for me is concerning in terms of, so when did you decide to take a step backwards? When did you decide in terms of, I shouldn't be scoring more goals? Because that's the name of the game at this point in time. Because for as bad as Liverpool are, as open as they are, they've got a Mo Salah to score them goals. As much as they've got Cody Gakpo who will miss, or Darwin Núñez who will miss, they've got a Mo Salah who is a killer. They've got players like Gravenberg who've ascended in terms of their responsibility, and they're cleaning up everything in front of them. And then they've got the Van Dijk, like you said, and they've got Alex in the back now as well in goals. So they must then be able to show up at the back. So for me, I thought to myself, well, you've got Timber. Yes, he was injured. You've got Calafuri now, but where are you? As you've bemoaned, Jay.
You see the players that you're counting? Defenders,
yeah.
Chuck.
And as you have bemoaning all the time that God knows what we'll do if Saka were to go down with injury. And that's the question that he's never answered, I think, in the 3 years at the helm, in terms of, what is your backup to Saka? Yes, you've got a backup for Martinelli who is trusted, but what is your backup to Saka? You've got Nwaneri, Skelly, I forget his name, but you've got all these other guys who are not quite that.
Lewis Skelly,
who are not quite that. And you're like, these guys are not ready to step up and fill in the boots of Saka or even Havertz, because Gabriel Jesus is not even a better deputy than it's not a good enough deputy for Havertz, because Havertz is not scoring enough. Gabriel is not scoring at all. You saw his exploits in the Champions League, 1-on-1 twice. He can't find the back of the net. If you can't find the back of the net via your strikers, who are your game breakers? Who are your game winners, you know? So it's surprising that Arsenal are where they are, because when I look at Arsenal's team, maybe you'll have question marks over Martinelli in terms of pure talent, but all of them have got footballing brains. All of them have got good footballing ability. And when you put the handbrake on that ability, in terms of let's be safe, I think you're doing yourself a disservice. So for
me, they have footballing ability, Chuck, but it's not geared towards attacking football.
And, they play with the handbrake,
and mainly that's because the coach is asking them to play like that, right? He just needs to open up the playbook, because you're not going to sign a whole host of players now in January, and there's an opportunity in the season, as you mentioned. Yes, and we've spoken about this ad nauseum now, that yes, Liverpool have the lead and they built the lead that they did, but they're not Teflon. You know, you feel like, and you've seen that they can be gotten, and there's still so much of the season to go, but you don't imagine you're going to solve the attacking problems in the transfer market right now in January. So the onus comes back on the coach in terms of how he sets up, and he needs to put those players in a better position to be able to be more attacking and to be dominant in that way on the score sheet, rather than just you have the ball and you're hard to score against. It cannot just be that. That's why I said at the beginning phase that's what you want, but at the point where now you are at a stage where you are challenging for things, you need to go out and win these games. And it cannot be that in every single game what you're relying on, as great a strength as it is, right? Because Arsenal could have scored 4 times with the corners against Manchester United, but it can't be that your whole game plan is that we're going to get a few set pieces and we're going to convert from some of them. You have players. You are the coach. You need as Mikel Arteta to make that work, whether it's inspiring those players to greater heights, or as I'm saying, it is scheming a game plan whereby there is more freedom and there is more space for them to exploit in the final third and to be able to score those goals. Mikel Arteta needs to figure it out, Chuck.
No, he has to, man, because I think I heard Thierry Henry say that to win the Premier League, you have to want to win it. You can't defend points you don't have. You can't play not to lose. You have to win the actual league. So I think he needs to change his mentality, because
you have to attack the league.
Yeah, not every team is West Ham, where it's going to be as open, very open, and you're going to have your way. Other teams are going to show up. Other teams are going to have a low block. Other teams are going to be structured, and then you have to show that you are a stronger team. You're a more disciplined team. You know what you want to do. In fact, whenever I've watched Arsenal for the past 2 seasons, I thought to myself, these guys know what to do all the time. Whenever they've got the ball in position, they know how to recycle the ball. They know which avenues to hurt the team in, and that's how they play. And that's why you see Saka pop up. So you see Martinelli pop up and Odegaard and all these guys, because they all know their job. At present, it doesn't quite look like that.
It doesn't quite look like that at all. But do you know what it's starting to look like, Chuck?
Yeah.
Starting to look like Christmas and the New Year and 2025. And Dana White says in 2025, we are getting the biggest heavyweight bout in UFC history. He says, when asked, Dana White, that the matchup between Tom Aspinall and the defending champion in that heavyweight division, Jon Jones, is 100% going to happen.
Uncle Dana. I mean, that's big news. Because there was
Dana does really always give us what we want, right?
And we do. I think that's his uniqueness about his division, because that's what he keeps saying about boxing, that you guys let the idea of these dream fights linger on forever, and then they happen too late or they don't happen at all. But with the UFC, the best have to fight the best. With the UFC, we won't really care much about the record. You could lose 5 or 10, but we'll still regard you as a GOAT. Unlike Jon Jones, it's not lost. But if you went through the hardest gauntlet of them all and you came out shining in the end, regardless of a couple of chips on your shoulder, then you are the champion or you're the GOAT in that particular division. And so we've got someone like Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, who's at his peak. Jon Jones seemed to be a little bit over the hill, but we'd never know up until we put them together, because I think to myself, he's been out for quite a while. That coming against a young guy like that might test him a little too much. But I think his wrestling is still a very big weapon. But what we do have, Jay, in this announcement is the idea that we rid ourselves of the idea of Jon Jones versus Alex Pereira. It's not happening. What we have for sure, and what we have as a 100% guarantee, is Aspinall versus Jon Jones. And I think for me, it's been long overdue, because Jon Jones has been the king, right, at light heavyweight, ascends to heavyweight, beats Cyril Gane, then beats Stipe. Tom Aspinall has run through everyone in front of him up until then, and he had the interim title for so long that you thought to yourself, well, isn't the point of the interim championship the king in the absence of the king? Now that the king is back, let them face each other, right? And I think now we've got the fight that we've always wanted, and I just can't wait.
Let's settle it. Let's settle it. Who is the king of the hill? And the other thing, Chuck, that we are putting to rest is that Jon Jones is ducking Tom Aspinall.
Yeah.
Because Dana White said behind the scenes, Jon Jones has never been that guy. He's never been a guy to turn down a fight. And here we are, right? And all those people who said if it quacks like, if it swims like, it must be. What do you have to say now about Jon Jones ducking this fight? Because what we have on record from Uncle Dana is that it is 100% happening. He also teased that there's something big that's also going to happen that we're not prepared for. Can't wait to actually get the confirmation as to what that is. But right here, right now, Chuck, absolutely excited about yet another fight that we've been speaking about, that we've been building up to, and that we've been talking about as a fantasy matchup about to happen in 2025. It's going to happen. So I can't wait until we get there and we get to witness Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall. And I hope we see a few fights between the two of them, in fact.
I think, Jay, look, what's also on the line is Dana White's reputation, because for every question that was posed or asked of Dana White, the answer's always been Jon Jones. Who's the pound for pound? Jon Jones. Who's the GOAT? Jon Jones. Who's the best? Jon Jones. And now Jon Jones goes against Tom Aspinall, and we get to see what was Dana White right all along, because Dana White kept saying, if you put two people in a room and you close the door, the person who's coming out is Jon Jones. Now we know who the other person in the room is. It's Tom Aspinall. Now we need to see
what the man who finishes his fights on average in 2 minutes, Chuck.
Let's see if Dana White is right about this game, because, I mean, he's the president, right? So you want to trust him a bit, but Tom is coming for him, and we'll see if the young guns, if the young gun rather has got enough in the tank for Jon Jones.
We'll certainly see, and we will be talking about that. Best believe it. Thank you once again for joining us on Two Up Front. Please continue to show us support, show us some love. We are on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like, comment, share it far and wide. It is Two Up Front. You can also find us on the socials to continue the conversation. We are on every social media platform. It is at Two Up Front Pod. You can find me at J_Mzulu, and you can find Chuck at Chuck2Up. From myself, Jay, I'm outie.
Pirates is back in Africa. United are beating City in a derby. Jon Jones fighting Tom Aspinall. The world is back in order.